Okay, so we're continuing our talk about functions today. And we're going to start off talking about what's called function rules. Function rules. So I'm going to give you a couple of definitions first. By the way, your test over this stuff will be late next week, and you do get to use these journals on that test, so make sure you carry it with you. All right, so function rule. A function rule is a mathematical expression that explains a function. A mathematical expression that explains a function. So you remember we talked about the Coke machine? And I put $1 in, I would get 1 Coke out. Put $2 in, I get 2 Cokes out. So that mathematical function, that expression, would be 1 times however many dollars I put in is going to tell me how many Cokes. Because everything's $1. Now they've upped the price, so it's $1.25. It's not just $1. So what is it going to change the function rule to? For every Coke I get, how much am I spending? $1.25. So instead of $1 times however many, it's going to be $1.25 times however many. You see what I'm saying? So it changes it a little bit. That's a function rule.
We have already done this? Already done this.
So we'll just watch quietly. So evaluate is the next thing. To evaluate is to plug in the input number to find the output number. It's when you have a rule and you're plugging in the input to figure out what the output is. Once you have that written down, you need to cut out this little thing right here. You can glue it down. Okay, so cut that out and get that glued down. Okay, so this is going to be our function rule. You can write the word input on the little arrow. And then draw a little arrow that comes out of it. And write the word output. They're kind of using this, I know it looks like a sock that somebody cut the toe off of or something, but it's But it's supposed to be a function machine. You put the input number in, you figure out the output number. This right here is your function rule. That's the rule we're going to use to figure out our output numbers. Okay, so with this one, they gave us this little table. They're letting us pick the input numbers. Well, if they're going to let me pick the input, I'm going to do the easy ones. Okay, so if you're allowed to pick the input numbers, pick easy numbers. Don't pick like crazy numbers that makes it more difficult. So we're going to do 0, 1, 2, and 3, just keeping it simple. And what that means is I'm going to take those numbers and plug them into that rule and figure out what would the output number be. So these are going to go in instead of x. That's what the numbers are going to go in there. So the first one's going to be 3 times 0 plus 4. What's 3 times 0?
0.
0 plus 4 is 4. So 4 goes right here.
6 has 10.
Hold on. All right, so the next one, we're going to plug in the 1. So it's 3 times 1 plus 4. So 3 times 1 is, okay. 3 times 1 is 3. And then 3 plus 4 is 7. And then you're going to do the next one. 3 times 2 plus 4.
6.
So 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 plus 4 is 10. And then the last one,
9.
3 times 3 is 9, plus 4 is 13. Not us. Okay, so that's just input, output. We're just figuring out, using a rule, what the input and output is. Now, it's a little different because we've been doing functions and it's just been a list of points, right? This one gives us a rule on how they're getting those points. So that's why this is a little different. All right, a couple more terms. Function notation is something you need to know what that is. Function notation, and you see it on our little chart. Y'all see where it says F parentheses X? Whoops, not on mine. There you go.
Yes,
F parentheses X. Okay, really, that's just a fancy way for them to write the Y. So if you want to put Y above that, you can. But F parentheses X is function notation. It equals Y. And you'll hear teachers say that, like the way I say that is F of X or function of X. All right, F of X or function of X. All it means is something is relying on X. Well, Y always relies on X, so that's why F of X is the same as Y. Domain. Domain is all possible X values. All possible X values, all possible input. That's your domain. Range is all possible Y values. All possible Y values are your output. Okay, be really careful because this range is different from the range you learned in like 6th grade. Okay, the whole mean, median, mode range, forget all about that range for right now. Because frustratingly enough, we have another term called range and it means something totally different and it's still in math. So this range is all possible Y values. So if you had a problem like the one we had right up here, and they asked you to write the domain and range, this is what you would do. I'm just going to put D for domain. you would draw these little squigglies, and you would just write the x values. What are my input numbers?
0, 1, 3.
0, 1, 2, 3. There's my domain. Don't overthink it, just write them down.
Right.
Nothing too complicated. Okay, so the range is gonna be the y numbers or the output. Like that. 4, 7, 10, and 13, that's the range. Everybody got that? Okay, so the next thing I want you to cut out is this little sentence that says find the range values. But just cut out A. We're not going to do B, so just cut out A. Once you get that glued down, you can label a few things. I've labeled a couple things on here. The f parentheses x, the f of x is the same as y. That x minus 3, that's your rule. So you can write rule on there. And then the domain is your input numbers. So those are the input numbers we're going to use. How many input numbers do I have? 4. How many output numbers should I have? 4. So if you have 4 input and you don't come up with 4 output numbers, there might be a problem there. Okay, you need 4 answers on these kind of questions. When we have a test, if I give you 3 input numbers, please give me 3 output numbers. Okay, because then you're going to miss some if you don't. All we're doing is taking these input numbers and plugging them in right here where this x is. So my first one is -2. So instead of x minus 3, we're going to do -2 minus 3. So I have -2 and another -3. They're all negative. Same sign, add and keep. So we combine them together and keep it negative. So 2 plus 3 is 5, right? And this stays negative. So -5. I'm going to go ahead and put R for range. We're going to start writing our range numbers down. What's my next input number? 0. So this one's going to be 0 minus 3. Should be -3. That one should be pretty easy. The next one is 2 minus 3 is -1. And I'm going to say it on the tape right now that at home, when you're doing your homework, when you get to these, if you want to use a calculator, I'm totally fine with that. When you're just figuring out domain and range, I'm okay with you using a calculator. So if your parents don't believe you, make them get on Schoology and rewind this tape. Miss Rieper said it out loud. Okay, 4 minus 3 is 1 is the last one. So there's my range. Once you've got that written down, I want you to flip back to the page where we drew our x and our y. And if you weren't here, you might want to draw these somewhere. I froze this one so that you can get that written down, but I'll unfreeze it just a second. Okay, so flip back to these x and y, because we're going to name them now. Okay, Okay, if you don't have these, you might want to draw them somewhere in your notes because this is going to help you out. They're kind of goofy looking. They have little faces on them and feet and whatever. Okay, so the X, her name is Dixie, D-I-X-I. Spelled kind of weird. Her name's Dixie. This is something new. I haven't done this before this year. So this is Dixie. And the Y is Dory. D-O-R-Y. And those are acronyms. Do y'all know what acronyms are? Where every letter stands for something? Okay, so on Dixie, D stands for domain. What would I stand for? That we've learned. Huh?
Independent.
Independent.
The X value, the input,
Okay,
and the limit.
hold on. Slow down. Okay, so independent. The X value, we're just going to leave the X there. We don't have to write anything on that. And then the last one is input. So Dixie is domain, independent, X, input. Or you could switch the I's. It won't matter. They're both I. And then Dory. What would the D stand for on Dory? Dependent. What about the O? What would the O be? Output.
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 What's R?
R is one we just learned.
Range.
Range. There we go. And the Y. And the cool thing about her name being Dory is if you've watched Finding Nemo, you know Dory always needed some help, right? She needed a little bit of help. I love the character. I'm a fan of Ellen, so I like Dory a lot. But dependent Dory kind of makes sense. Dory's pretty dependent. She needed some help. So kind of remember, Dory goes with the Y, Dixie goes with the X. Okay, I'm going to stop the video and then start it again because the reason it won't load is because it's too long. Maybe.